Okay, so we talked about shock. Let's talk about scale, because when I think about Silk Road, that was a long time ago. Where does the state of crime using crypto stand right now?
So if you look past like Silk Road, that was one marketplace. Once Silk Road was taken down, it kind of like did this whack-a-mole type of thing where it dispersed and criminals were like, oh, that's a really ingenious idea in order for me to actually do my criminal activities. So you see this mold that then is being expanded within that. But if you go past just like darknet markets and drug trafficking, or even the aspects of child exploitation sites that are also being leveraged on that, the other type of crime is not necessarily financially driven. So we've seen individuals that have taken advantage of the Bitcoin blockchain and have been able to put messaging within the transactions so that it's encrypted, and there's botnets that then crawl the blockchain in order to decrypt that to then infiltrate different aspects. So what we saw with this was a bunch of cryptojacking that was actually occurring. So rather than just seeing the transaction that was occurring on a financial aspect, this is now being deployed for a cyber component as well.
I mean, something we noticed just a few weeks ago is ISIS is trying to raise funds through the use of NFTs. Mm-hmm. Completely novel application of the technology. The technology is amazing, it's great, but illicit actors can also use it in novel ways that are actually pretty concerning.
How are they trying to do that?
So basically, you create sort of an NFT and use that as a means of collecting funds. And so our team at TRM was able to identify that in advance and essentially notify, law enforcement, and it's since been taken down. It doesn't look like, they had actually mobilized the NFT yet. They were basically doing the preparatory work.
I assume those NFTs weren't like pudgy penguins or anything like that.
I wish.
Yeah.
But you bring up actually my next question, which is like, I actually just don't
ahead.
get how ISIS would do this with an NFT. Like, explain how this would work.
Well, essentially you would, send funds to that NFT, right? You would use that digital representation to store value. And I mean,
so that NFT would be not associated officially with a terrorist organization.
Correct. You wouldn't realize that at the time that you were sending it, though people in the know would know to send, and it would evade detection, right?
So you're essentially setting up a bank account that is unlinked to any entity in order to raise funds for terrorists.
Right. Essentially, you would be receiving funds in a digital manner that's not tied to any particular KYC information, right?
Know your customer.
Know your customer. And you would then use that and sort of move it off, move it to other chains or other areas, and then try to turn it into cash.
So to that point, I feel like ISIS wouldn't have been using NFTs, 3-4 years ago. I know you both have been involved in the space for a long time. Beth, I know that you've been looking at, illicit activities using crypto since 2014. We've touched on some of this, but tell me how the use case has evolved since then. Has it gotten more creative? How has it changed?
Oh, it's definitely more creative. So I like to always think back in the good old days with Bitcoin, because it's no longer the good old days, where like the technology has advanced and all of these different aspects of cryptocurrency have popped up. So you have NFTs, you now have all of the DeFi tokens that are available and the platforms that are operating in that manner that it's hard to keep up with all of that. So not only are you having individuals that are still in the Bitcoin realm, but they're now transitioning into the DeFi space. And there's so many advancements with that, with blockchains on top of other blockchains, and just being able to understand what that technology represents, as well as how criminals are using that technology for what it does not necessarily represent, right? And to me, that's the evolution that will always continue. And being able to understand how it's being leveraged is one of the most interesting things for the evolution of what cryptocurrency is.
Is it kind of easy to make money as a criminal using crypto?
I would say there are ways to take advantage of the systems for sure. So you have platforms now where you can stake funds, right? And you can stake that with criminal funds. And so like you actually are earning money and interest on all of these different things that are actually illicitly earned.
I'm wondering if what you heard from Joe Weisenthal makes sense, that this stuff, in order for it to actually serve its promise as a stateless currency and help people who are oppressed, it has to become better at crime. Because what you guys do at TRM, at Chainalysis, like you track this stuff, something that we know can be tracked now, but people had this idea that it was untrackable.
Well, look, I think privacy is very important, right? And so, at TRM, for example, we don't touch personal sensitive data. It's all the blockchain information is publicly available. It's on a public blockchain, and you can trace it over time.
Which is what Joe was saying is why it's not good for crime.
Right. But just because something isn't necessarily good for crime doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, right? There's a lot of positive use cases for crypto generally, or for distributed ledger technology, which is what all of this stuff is based on, that often people are overlooking, right? I mean, think about the last time you tried to send funds to, if you've got relatives in other parts of the world. In the traditional banking system, it takes days, there's fees everywhere, and it takes forever.
Costs a lot of money.
And it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And with crypto, and you need a bank account on both sides.
If you were a criminal, would you use crypto, or would you put the cash in a suitcase and sort of try to shovel around that way?
So can I give you my honest answer?
Yes.
Please.
I am not a criminal.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's on the record.
This is a brain exercise, though. It requires us to suspend reality.
I mean, look, cash is still king when it comes to illicit activity, right? Crypto is certainly a means of doing illegal things, but there are aspects that are more traceable, but there are aspects that make it more obfuscatable, like mixers and other kinds of technology. So I certainly wouldn't be in the business of advising criminals what to do or what not to do.
Beth, Sujit's talked a lot about state actors, and I'm wondering in your work if you have any data that shows to what extent the crime is being committed by state-sponsored actors versus by rogue individuals with no connection to a state.
Yeah, so what we were able to identify is that for nation-state actors, there's over $400 million that we have been able to tie to North Korea, for instance, right? However, if you look at just individual illicit actors within that, although the hacks are very large, so $600 million at a time for a hack, right? It makes and grabs attention for headlines. However, what is not being looked at are individuals that are still soliciting illicit means, but they're doing it at a smaller scale, but a higher transaction rate. So that actually supersedes the amount that's actually being moved on the illicit scale for that.
That's really interesting, and I swear I'm just curious. So if you were committing a crime, it sounds like just a series of smaller transactions makes a lot more sense.
In any type of movement for financial means, that is the best way, right? So in a traditional financial aspect, right, there's reporting requirements in order for transactions that hit a banking system, right? And so, and those are the suspicious activity reports that financial institutions and money service businesses are actually supposed to report. So if you're underneath that threshold, like, you're not going to be able to be reported on as easily. $10,000 for funds that are going
You're asking a lot of weird
I want
questions.
specifics.
In all seriousness, all this talk of state actors kind of has me thinking about whether or not all of this is actually a good development or not. And I'm wondering, North Korea recently launched a missile over Japan and sent, shockwaves throughout the world. And they do this every once in a while. And I'm wondering, Sujit, if you think North Korea would be as powerful as it is today and as much of a menace to the rest of the world if there was no such thing as crypto.
Yeah, I think you can strip the crypto conversation out of that, because North Korea has been engaging in this kind of malign cyber activity for years. They tried to steal, I think it was $1 billion from the Bank of Bangladesh a few years ago, by basically hacking into the Federal Reserve of New York's account that the Bank of Bangladesh was using and siphon that money out. Nothing to do with crypto, right? It was just a cyber hack. So crypto certainly makes it, a more interesting conversation, because there are certain things that nation state actors can do that they couldn't do more, as easily in a purely kind of analog world.
Do you guys like crypto? I mean, do you guys look at the worst side of crypto when you zoom out from that? I mean, do you see this as a net positive, or what are your feelings?
All right, it's definitely a net positive. Like, it's innovation at its finest, and it's really fascinating to be able to watch. Being able to step back and see that individuals that maybe in underprivileged areas that have access to financial means through crypto is fantastic. And just being able to leverage that in a way that makes it to where almost everybody can be on the same playing field, to me, is one of the most rewarding things within this space.
Would you agree with Sujit that we have to strip crypto out of the conversation there, because even if there were no crypto, these sanctioned countries would still be able to access funds to fund whatever they're doing?
Yeah, and like I would actually say that the crypto aspect is actually a positive thing with it. And I say that because it is transparent for us to be able to actually track those funds and actually see what is going on within those different countries, which is if you took the crypto out of it, like completely, we would lose insight into what's actually going on, and we wouldn't be able to tie that back to us.
Does it, Sujit, undermine American foreign policy at all?
So look, that's a really interesting question. Obviously, certain countries are trying to use crypto to kind of evade the international, global financial system, which is very much U.S. led, or at least led by kind of Western countries and Western values. But here's an interesting kind of other side to it. You talk about stable coins, right, which are basically tied to the U.S. dollar. I could see a world in which if there was more expansion of stable coins, that actually promotes the growth of the U.S. dollar into areas where it maybe doesn't exist now. So, crypto, again, cuts both ways. You've got to really understand it, and then you can make good policy.
Who's your favorite TV cop? Like, who do you model yourself after?
Well, I was not a cop. I was a prosecutor. So if you watch Law & Order,
Yes.
I always identified with the lawyers, but I did like the guys in Law & Order. Got to be honest. I wish I knew their names.
SVU or just,
SVU,
like,
yeah.
regular?
It's Mariska Hargitay's character I like a lot.
Olivia Benson?
There it is.
Yeah.
Beth, what about you?
So mine, it's not a TV show, but it would be Clarice from Silence of the Lambs.
Oh,
Yes,
that's a
yes.
good one.
So-
Do you identify with her?
Yeah, so my whole dream job, right, was to actually be a profiler, and that's what I wanted to do, and then I got sidetracked with crypto, so here I am.
Sujit Raman, Beth Bisbee. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
It kind of seems like you're ready for a life of crime,
I don't know. After listening to this episode, we mapped a pretty good blueprint.
but not using Bitcoin.
Maybe Monero, definitely a mixer, and I would keep it under 10 grand.
I thought you were a grizzled old cop with a heart of gold.
Things change.